Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow. We are back here for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's most interesting conservative podcast. I am joined here in studio today with Chris Ingstad and John Hendrickson, and we had, again, seems to be a common theme on the ITR Live podcast, little technical difficulties of me figuring out how to do this. We had a little feedback in the system, which I've resolved some of it, and I was ridiculed that my fix was a little more than blowing into the microphone jack and tapping on the soundboard.
Clearly, you're used to solving, Nintendo problems or TV antenna problems. This is definitely a podcast by Generation Xers.
I remember the first time I encouraged one of my kids to fix some electronic toy by blowing into the jack or something, and they look at me like, "What in the world's wrong with you, Dad?"
Didn't your fixes work though?
It seems to be better.
It's better.
Yeah, I hope so. Chris, you're the one that came actually prepared for today's episode wearing the Chiefs gear.
That's right. Well, you and I have a meeting to talk about property taxes with folks on Monday. I can't show up to that meeting in a Chiefs sweatshirt or Chiefs jersey, so I've got to get my Super Bowl fandom out today.
So if the Chiefs win, you can't show up on Monday wearing Chiefs gear?
Should I treat it like a draft pick, like put the jersey on over my shirt and tie or something?
There you go.
Maybe we'll do it that way.
Well, unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we did not get media credentialed to the Super Bowl. So we are here doing our Super Bowl preview show from the podcast studio in West Des Moines.
John was chomping at the bit to get onto Media Row on Monday, a Super Bowl week, and ask some questions, but it was denied.
We can get to Davos, but we can't get to Super Bowl.
That's right. Nice.
They've got better music there.
Yeah. Well, the the media credentialed application had apparently our background in 1920s and 30s presidential politics didn't seem to fit quite with what they were doing. So, Chris, the Chiefs are underdogs. Are you buying that?
Sure. I guess. I don't know if a Mahomes totally healthy high ankle would change that or not, but I think that it's pretty close. What was it, a point and a half the last time I saw? We don't have our resident betting expert Victoria here to weigh in.
Yeah,
maybe she could phone in. But look, Mahomes' ankles holds up. They've got a chance. The offensive line keeps Philly's really solid defense at bay. They have a shot. And if Kansas City's defense can kind of hang in there, they've got a shot. But I mean, those are the three things that I will be watching for among bites of really unhealthy food.
Yes,
all Sunday night.
That's exactly right. I'm a believer. I'm a homer. I'm a Chiefs fan. I believe that Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback ever to play the game of football. And I also think he's got the X factor that he makes the play when the play needs to be made. And somehow he will find a way to pull out a win.
Great. I'm rolling. Thinking back, the first Chiefs game I went to was over 35 years ago, and Todd Blackledge was the quarterback. So I'm going to enjoy the Patrick Mahomes era. I'm going to wear the shirt to work because I've been through all of it since then. So
yes. No, the only Chiefs game I think I've been to two, I think was Mark Vlasic as a starting quarterback in that one.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So anyway, John, did that ready with all his hot takes about Chiefs football and the Super Bowl? Do you even watch it?
No, I don't.
Just you. There's got to be some history book to read, right? Yeah.
What was the last thing you watched? In fact, what were you watching 5 minutes before we hit record on this today, John?
I was watching the governor present at the Cato Institute.
How'd she do?
She did wonderful. It's really good.
Good.
I watched it too, John. I didn't catch the very beginning, but I'll want to go back and see it. But I agree. I think it was a really strong performance, and I just enjoy seeing what we've done in Iowa being showcased on the national stage, and I think that's a very good thing, both for Iowa and for the conservative movement.
When you look at the topics they covered, from tax and budget and regulation and reforming state government and education. I mean, it's really incredible what reforms.
Come on, John, stay on topic. Let's go.
What's really incredible, what conservative reforms Iowa has done the last several years. I mean, it's amazing. And as you said, I think sometimes we get overlooked because we're flyover country and we're a smaller state, but we've really made a lot of good progress on some really good conservative policies. And I think the governor was able to share those with the nation today at Cato, and then later on this afternoon, she's going to be going over to the American Enterprise Institute and presenting to them as well on the Students First Act.
I agree with that. And I think one of the things that watching the governor is her enthusiasm shines through for this. This is not just an intellectual exercise, but it's something she really believes. And that comes across just in how she talks about these things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I know that in the past, we in Iowa have done big things that maybe didn't get the national recognition that it might have come from another state, but I think that's changing. I really do. I think that Iowa now in the policy world is and has become the real standard, the real example.
Look, we have friends in the state policy, network who reached out to our governor this week, and we'd love you to come to our state and tell us how you're able to have all these successes. So yes, folks are realizing.
And one of the Cato scholars I thought was made a really good comment. He said after listening to Governor Reynolds during the event, he said, "I'm happy about federalism because Iowa's an example where so much is going well, and of course there's definitely examples of one of the favorite points I think that the governor raised that I really liked was." When they asked her about, what's the difference between Iowa and Illinois, and she said, well, it's philosophy, between two views of government, two very different views of government. And certainly she outlined, a conservative limited government versus the blue state progressive tax and spend environment. And, federalism is working. And Iowa's an example of that where, people are looking to Iowa now to replicate what we are doing. And, just within tax reform, we've had probably the most impressive and most extensive tax reform in the nation.
But honestly, it's beyond tax and spend. I mean, that is, I guess, literally the ways and means of how that type of big government philosophy operates, right? But it's really more the thought of who should be doing these things? Who should we look to for help, or where's the solution going to come from? Do we want to be more or less dependent on government? So yes, that manifests itself into more taxes and more spending in those blue states. And here, we don't think that's the role of government. And frankly, we trust our businesses, our families, our citizens to make the best choices and do the best with those things. We try to keep government's role at its necessary but limited, level. And that is what we've seen. And that's the progress we've been making on all sorts of fronts in the past.
I noticed a couple other things that the governor said, and one that sort of dovetails on something we've been talking about a lot here on recent episodes. As the governor was talking about her state government reorganization proposal, which the bill itself is about 1,500 plus pages in the actual bill, but we've talked a lot about we want to see local government in Iowa do follow the model of the state government in limited spending and then having that work to the benefit of their local taxpayers. It's time for local governments to follow that model. And she made a comment in there that on the reorganization of that administrative branch is that she wanted that also to be an example to local governments in Iowa and that we need to do it that way. And I really thought that was fantastic. And I hope that that's a message that we can all lean on going forward is there are better ways to deliver government.
Yes.
And it actually is one that should be enticing regardless of where you're at on the political spectrum, is that even if you're a big spending liberal, I think you'd like to see more of the spend of government services going directly to those services and not chewed up in administrative costs. So, hopefully that's something that can be at least of some bipartisan interest. And I also she was asked about her role as a leader in women in government. And obviously she's Iowa's first woman governor. And she talked a little bit about that, but she really leaned into the example that she's tried to hold herself out as and work with younger girls that she comes across. And I really like that because I've got a couple of adorable pictures of my daughter with Governor Reynolds, and I've seen that. I've seen the way that young girls react to her, and that really is really cool. And I think it's awesome. And I'm glad that it's something that just she almost said I didn't really appreciate initially, but yet it's just cool story in the way she talks about it and works through it. So anyway, so yes, to Iowa and Governor Reynolds being showcased on the national stage. So back in Iowa, John, you've written about the state budget a little bit lately, and this week at the Capitol was a lot of the energy was behind the passage of medical malpractice tort reforms. And so that took a lot of the legislature's energy. But on the heels of a couple big bills already, it feels like the time in the session where there will start to be more attention paid on the state budget. And so it's something that we're going to want to watch going forward because, we're Iowans for tax relief. We work towards lower taxes, but the critical component of that is making sure that we keep spending under check. And so we need to follow the budget and make sure that stays in line too. So
John, do you have any ideas? Have you in fact even shaped up any ideas about how Iowa could craft their budget going forward?
We have a few ideas. Yeah.
Oh, well, you should tell us about them now.
Yeah.
I mean, and start with, Iowa's done a pretty good job.
Yes.
So far.
And this is, I would say this is a huge accomplishment of Governor Reynolds and the legislature, really, and she acknowledged that in her remarks at Cato because basically since she's assumed office, she's kept spending the growth of the state general fund under 3%, which is really impressive. I mean, that's probably the best record in the nation. In fact, that's why Cato gave her an A grade as the best fiscally conservative governor in the nation. But certainly the growth of state spending has really been slowed since she's assumed office, and really that's really what she's giving credit to, is that the reason why we could do these tax reforms was because controlling and limiting spending, and that again is another lesson for local governments. And when we talk about property taxes, but her budget this year, I believe, is $8.5 billion, which is just a slight increase from last year's budget, and about, I think it's a 3% increase, and a large portion of that is because of the Students First Act, the ESA program, and so I think overall, spending has been very good. She's only spending about 82% of projected revenues, which is very good. And so, is there more things that can be done? Yes. And the foundation just issued a paper looking at.
I was wondering if I was going to have to tee you up even better to talk about your deal. We've gotten there.
Took him 2 or 3 minutes, but he got around to it.
But we just issued a paper that was actually co-authored with one of our contributing scholars, Dr. Vance Ginn, who's the chief economist with the Pelican Institute for Public Policy in Louisiana, and Vance has done other work as well, but he's been helping us the last few years with sort of budget analysis and some other reforms. And so we take a look at the spending record as well as look at some things that could be improved upon. And one recommendation that we have is strengthening Iowa's spending limitation. And so right now Iowa has a spending limit of 99% of projected revenue, which is somewhat effective, but it's fairly weak. And so in the paper we make some recommendations of possibly strengthening that spending limit and placing that a stronger one within the state constitution, which makes it more harder for legislators to go around, because let's face it, Governor Reynolds won't be in office forever, and so you may not have a governor or a legislature in the future that would be as committed as she is to holding the line on spending. And so, fiscal rules are important, both at the state level and at the local level, and even one could make the case, especially even we need one at the national level to control spending, because legislators, there's so many special interests out there saying we want more money.
Yeah. John, could I summarize the piece that you and Vance wrote, so folks understand exactly what we're talking about? Is you've titled it the Conservative Iowa Budget, and the principle that really guides all of that is your government spending should not be allowed to grow faster or in excess of the combination of population growth and inflation. Yes. And that seems like a reasonable benchmark. And what you've demonstrated in there is one, in recent years, Governor Reynolds and the Iowa legislature have kept spending below that growth threshold, right? Which has created opportunities for tax reform. In the past, before that, even as we adhered to the 99% spending limit, which is a good thing to have, right? But the difference between a more conservative Iowa budget and just the 90% has equaled almost like $3 billion of taxes sort of paid over the past roughly 10 years. That had we always adhered to the stricter budgeting guidelines, we would have been able to keep in our pockets. And so you guys have put that idea out there, and Chris, you and I were talking about this a little bit. The idea of that conservative Iowa budget principle of limiting it to population growth and inflation is a good benchmark or a good starting point for legislators to consider as they go about crafting their budget this year. And we have not yet heard, correct me if I'm wrong, we have not yet heard what the House or Senate budget targets are, right?
Yeah. On the current 99% expenditure limitation, there's two real problems with that. One is it's only on available revenue. It's not even on the ongoing revenue number. So if you run a surplus the year before, so you got a little extra money in your pocket at the end of the year, you can actually spend more under that limitation the state collects in revenue. Now, thinking all the way back to when we first took the majority in the Iowa House, we internally held ourselves to 99% of available or ongoing revenue. Mm-hmm. But the other problem with it too, talking about future legislatures, John, is that's only in the Iowa Code. And there's one magic word that the legislature can put into a spending bill that negates that, and it's just notwithstanding any other provision of the code. So any other future legislature could easily come in and spend 101% if they simply put those magic words into the code. They
also could just rewrite the code.
Right. Exactly. And so to the point about a constitutional expenditure limitation, that prevents a future legislature from negating that. But all that being said, to think the expenditure limitation that was created in the past at 99%, and then to think, but the governor only proposes to spend 82. We are well below that. And the basic fact is that Iowans are paying more in taxes than state government needs to operate. And
could I preview another article that John has coming out next week?
As long as it doesn't preclude us from recording another podcast about it, because I sometimes run out of topics. But yes.
Our friends in Montana have proposed a similar style of restriction, but not on their state government, but on local government. It's a way to keep property taxes in check. The same idea would be to limit their growth of local government spending to that combination of population change and inflation. And so we can talk about that more. We call this a tease in the business. We can talk about that more next week. Our listeners can check out John's article on that on our website next week. So make sure you come back and check in, guys.
Well, in that whole idea, and we will come back and talk about it, of not spending more than you collect in revenue, dovetails in with a previous ITR Foundation report about the amount of unassigned ending fund balances that currently exist in local government budgets. So the same dynamic is happening at the local level, is that they're collecting more in tax revenue than they need to operate, both in their surplus amounts and just the rapid expansion of their budgets. Right. So Yes, we have had a lot to say about that, and we will have a lot more to say about it. But it is, again, you talk about federalism and the laboratories of democracy. Watching what other states do on these things is a great way to go and find out what works and what doesn't, and how to get about putting those restraints into local government in Iowa. So I'm excited, John. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, it's a good piece of legislation.
Good. All right. Well, gentlemen, we're kind of bumping up against the magic time here. So we will have a link to John's article about the state budget with Vance Ginn. That'll be up at itrfoundation.org. There'll be a link in the comments below. And we got the Super Bowl. We got a lot going on. We'll be back with you next week. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more to talk about. So
indeed,
with that, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and tell your friends, neighbors, colleagues, and even the people that you disagree with, because we think a lot of these things, we think we've got good solutions and a better way to deliver government that honors the taxpayers that foot the bill. So with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.